Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 733 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened in the last week across NXT and AEW. Both companies, or I should say brands in this case, still a ways out from their next major shows. So this was pretty much a normal week of television. What that allows is for the Silver King to dig a little deeper in the world of professional wrestling. We have a number of additional topics to discuss on today's show. And I watched not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 episodes of WWE Evolve. And we're going to do, let's call it the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, a special Evolve segment right in the middle of today's show. There will be timestamps in the episode description, as always, so you can bounce around from one topic to another if you so choose. If you only want to, hear takes from NXT or AEW, or in this case, Evolve, or perhaps if you just haven't seen any of those shows yet and you want to listen to this episode in piecemeal. But as always, I do hope you listen to the entire show. Off the top, allow me to remind you to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Not only do you get full audio episodes there, but you get our full video interviews as well. Again, that's us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. You get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also send in questions and comments for the show. We will do our best to read them live right here on the air. Now, we normally kick off these Thursday episodes by diving into NXT.
But I'm afraid I've got some news.
We have a few items to discuss right off the top, not necessarily about NXT and AEW. Indy Hartwell has signed with TNA Wrestling. Not only that, she's continuing to use her old WWE name, even though they hold the trademark. That lends further credence to what I've previously speculated, that WWE is working with TNA in some way to get employment for release talent that it wants to keep close. Either way, that's great news for Indy, and it's quite possible she just got this completely on her own. Not discounting that. She's certainly a name enough and valuable enough to be part of that Knockouts division. I'm excited to see what she can basically show us with this opportunity. Maybe she can take some big steps similar to what Naomi did when she spent, some time over in TNA Wrestling. But it just is interesting to me, the certain people that TNA has been signing and how there seems to still be that relation to WWE from a talent standpoint, not to mention their operating agreement, which of course they announced earlier this year. And, this may play into some other names in the future. In fact, we're going to mention a couple of them in a minute. But speaking of TNA and TNA Rebellion, which is where this was announced over the weekend, X-Pac showed up on the show and he got physically involved in a match. He looked great. He moved extremely well, not out of breath, anything like that. I've been wondering and straight up hoping that X-Pac one day could be a surprise Royal Rumble entrant. And I've really been seeking that over the last few years where they've gone away from the surprise old schoolers being part of the Royal Rumble. It's just never happened. He hasn't had a real match in 3 years, but looking the way he did over the weekend, you cannot tell me that he couldn't go 5 to 7 minutes in a Rumble. I have absolutely no doubt about that. It would have been great to have him in Tampa 2 years ago, but I hope we see him sooner than later. Stardom lost 2 notable stars over the last week in Thekla and more notably Mayu Iwatani. There was obvious speculation off the jump where they would be headed, with Thekla being close to Julia of WWE and Mayu being even closer to IYO SKY and Kairi Sane. Thekla is reportedly headed to AEW. This is per Fightful. Makes a lot of sense on one hand from the sense that there's really just not a lot of space in WWE's women's division right now. But on the other hand, the women in AEW are still basically relegated to 1 match per show most nights, and if they're lucky, they get a second segment. And that division over there is getting super strong talent-wise. So I'm not completely sure how that is going to work. I'm not as familiar with Thekla as I am with others, probably because I haven't really watched much Stardom recently. Mayu on Thursday, she did sign with Marigold. So she's obviously staying in Japan, but she mentioned working with IYO and Kairi, and WWE, they obviously have a relationship with Marigold where IYO got to wrestle a match there last year. Whether she's in matches with them or she teams with them and that happens in Japan, or potentially they make their way over to the United States for a special show, that remains to be seen. But it just feels like the way she was speaking that she's going to do something with WWE at some point. Clearly, though, and she had previously stated, she did not want to move to the United States. She gets homesick really easily. So staying over in Japan and her primary company being Marigold makes a lot of sense. This one, I can't even believe I'm going over. But Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff announced a new wrestling promotion, except it's not professional wrestling. It's freestyle, unscripted. It's called Real American Freestyle. Hogan's going to be the on-screen commissioner, Bischoff serving as the company leader and, I guess, architect. Shockingly, Silver King believes this is not a totally terrible idea. Obviously, I don't think for a second that Hogan and Bischoff are the right people to build a company behind, but there's no debating that their names have cachet in the industry, despite however you feel and however I feel about either of them as people. The truth is there are a ton of freestyle wrestlers who neither go into pro wrestling nor combat sports after their collegiate careers end. And look, if you can have a pro bull riding league and a pro track and field league, which I believe is either getting off the ground or got off the ground and it started, then freestyle wrestling might actually work. The collegiate crowds are really energetic, and all it takes to get a streaming deal these days is either a couple 100,000 interested fans or a believable contention that those fans exist. Will this ultimately work? I'm dubious, but there's a ton of venture capital money out there in sports right now. There are people looking for sports in which to invest. And for some reason, I feel like this might actually come together. So it's something to keep an eye on. Even if it does come into fruition, it won't be something we cover here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. But for the announcement of Hogan and Bischoff trying to do this, I did feel it was immensely notable. And as a close here, we'll cover a WWE specific item. There have been some cryptic tweets over the last 48 hours from Dakota Kai, Shotzi, and Austin Theory, possibly relating to their futures in WWE. Dakota noted that she's healthy and not being used on television, which started a whole conversation I frankly don't want to have again. We'll probably briefly dive into it on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover Friday, whatever day I end up posting the update. Shotzi posted a video that made it sound like she had been released, but here we are hours later taping the show and no such announcement has come out. Theory posted a tweet about believing in yourself, which was really non-specific. Haven't seen any details or reports of releases or anything like that. I mean, it's possible they're May 2nd instead of May 1st, but I don't know. All three would be surprising releases for completely different reasons. Theory, the most surprising of all. We'll obviously wait to actually discuss this if there's anything to actually discuss, but seeing all three of those come in relative succession over, I think, let's say a 36-hour period maybe, it did kind of open my eyes to maybe something's actually going on here. And again, all three would be surprising, but all three for completely different reasons. Theory, the most surprising, just because of his age, his ceiling, and the fact that when WWE signed him out of Evolve, it seemed like he was a no-brainer to become a main eventer in just a few years. And he was kind of on his way there until the regime changed. So again, we're not saying anyone's gotten released. We don't know that. I'm just discussing some speculation that we saw on social media based on some tweets that they sent from their own accounts. So of course, we will circle back to that as appropriate if it becomes appropriate. And hopefully nothing comes of this and everyone is completely fine and people are just, in their feelings a little bit. And that would be the best case scenario. So with that said, let's kick things off from our weekly breakdown with NXT. We're going to go Evolve second. Again, that's going to be very fast. AEW third, and there are timestamps in the episode description, so you can go ahead and skip around if you so choose, but I certainly hope you don't. And right before we fully break down NXT, allow me to remind you that here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. You get all of it, and you support the continuation of the completely free Getting Over Wrestling podcast. $5 a month, $50 for the year. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We would greatly appreciate it. Okay, enough fooling with you. Let's get into NXT. Now, during that TNA pay-per-view over the weekend, Trick Williams caught Joe Hendry with a trick shot after he retained the TNA title in the main event. Hendry was invited to NXT by Shawn Michaels. He opened the show in his WrestleMania shirt. I presume fans chanted F that trick because the sound was muted for over 30 seconds. Hendry basically said Williams is jealous because he's more over, and Trick is going after his title because he can't beat Obafemi for the NXT title. Instead of Trick showing up, Dark State got their full gimmick, attacking 4-on-1, hitting the toss powerbomb. The attack was way too quick. The entire segment, including Hendry's promo, just lacked energy. Hendry had a fun presence, but when he speaks, man, the dude is so generic. It's tough. Dark State later got a social media promo that has been pretty much exactly like the other ones. Saquon Sugars showed the most personality. Cutler James remains oddly cast. Dude sticks out like a sore thumb in this group. Trick opened hour 2 saying Hendry's name, trying to get him out to the ring. He said that Joe's lucky Dark State got to him before Williams did. Clearly, people don't want him in NXT. Trick put himself over for a cameo on this All-American show with fans chanting Hollywood Trick. Williams had a great improv line saying Hendry is only local talent compared to him. Trick said he was on track to be like The Rock and John Cena, and he again demanded a chance from Femi. Ava confronted him, I believe with like new random music for some reason. She tore him down. Williams said he's become bigger than NXT, and he's also the biggest star in TNA. Ava decided Trick could get a number 1 contendership if he wins a 25-man battle royal for a title shot at Battleground. I sure as shit hope he doesn't just go into that match and win. It would be far more interesting for someone else to get that title shot rather than Williams go in as the favorite and come out on top. Given the graphic that showed who's involved in this, battle royal, including Timothy Thatcher, by the way, we know it's likely to happen. It's probably just going to be Trick, but I hope sincerely it is not. Trick was great on the mic here. It's the best he's been over the last few months. His arrow continues to point up, but he's still not doing himself any favors with the trick shot finisher and with just some of his wrestling that just straight up needs to improve. Later backstage, Oba guaranteed he would retain the title against whoever he faces. The Undertaker randomly stepped into frame saying Femi owned the NXT yard for now, but he had some guys from LFG that would be coming for him soon. Shiloh Hill, Anthony Luke, and Jasper Troy then walked up behind him, but Femi was completely unfazed by that. I get that they're trying to promote LFG. Suggesting neophytes should come in and go immediately after Oba was immensely silly, and I don't care if Taker has their back. It's just ridiculous to kind of suggest that at all. Now, I have not caught up with LFG like I have Evolve. Apples to apples, LFG is the better show. It's actually worth watching. Every week, I don't have A&E on either system that allows me to watch like cable television, so I actually have to have A&E send me the episodes, which I'm extremely lucky that they're willing to do, and thanks to A&E for doing that. But I will be catching up on LFG by next week. Maybe we discuss it a little bit here on the show. It is super entertaining, but again, no matter how entertaining it is, no matter the quality of prospect on that show, and it is a higher quality of prospect on that show, they should not be coming into NXT and just going after Obafemi. That's ridiculous. Tag team championship match. Hank and Tank defending against Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura. The challengers did a nice running boot German suplex combo. Hank kind of tripped getting run into the steel steps, but was thankfully okay. Briggs did a chokeslam and a lariat with Inamura landing his glider splash for a late broken fall. Inamura went to body slam Hank, accidentally swung his legs into Briggs. Yoshi then got taken out with the champions hitting their finisher to retain the titles. Man, I miss Fraxium. I mean, they were really carrying this entire division. I enjoyed the layout of the match. The way the finish was booked was pretty cool. It created some animosity in the challengers, both ahead of Yoshi leaving, but also they will both be in the Battle Royal next week. It served as a strong defense for Hank and Tank, just given the talent of Briggs and Inamura. Hank and Tank found Hendry in the training room. He was selling an injured right arm, but did honk honk with them before they basically said they believed and they would get his back against Dark State whenever he needs. That match was later set for next week. I forgot to mention earlier, the whole Trick leading Dark State deal, it's back on the menu, boys. Like, after that opening segment, all of a sudden, that becomes a possibility again. These three could make a relatively fun trio. Hendry with Hank and Tank, we'll see. But going up against a serious group like Dark State together, it might come across pretty strange in the ring. And hopefully, if this match is clean, Dark State wins this and probably pins Hank, would be the one who makes the most sense out of the trio. IYO SKY returned to NXT wanting to fight Julia and Roxanne Perez for what they did to her on Raw. Ava insisted she needed a partner, so Jordynne Grace came in wanting to team with her. It would be a struggle for me to explain the nuances of this segment, but IYO was immensely charismatic and actually quite funny here. Really good backstage segment between them. Roxy backstage told Julia she didn't like her at first, but she respected her after they had been in the ring together. Julia said she realized Perez has been right the entire time, presumably in her heelish ways, which is what I took from the comment. And they agreed that they can be unstoppable together. This is also kind of tough to explain, but even just visually, Julia in the braids as a heel exudes so much more aura than with the straight hair, smiling like a baby face. Julia is meant to be a heel. It is blatantly obvious. So we had IYO and Jordynne against Roxy and Julia. This main evented, and appropriately so. Corey Graves, before the bell, acknowledged the retirement of Meiko Satomura and put her over as a legend. I'm glad that was mentioned. Congratulations to Meiko on an incredible career. Disappointed, though, that she didn't have at least one WWE match on this tour. I understand why. She wanted to do everything in Japan, or that was easier perhaps, but it would have been nice because I think her last match was that random title match against Roxanne Perez. I believe is the last time they fought. I just would like to have seen one more Meiko match, whether it was against IYO or Julia or someone in WWE. That would have been really cool. The Faces did a really nice flip over senton off of Grace's shoulders. IYO hit her springboard missile dropkick and her celebration. Grace threw Julia into Perez for a 1-on-2 German and fisherman suplex combination. IYO got a hot tag and hit Julia with a Meteora as Roxy tagged in blind for a Hurricanrana. The heels combined for a Julia Northern Lights bomb and Perez double jump moonsault for a false finish. Grace and Julia brawled outside the ring. They literally rolled all the way up the ramp backstage together. Perez tried La Magistral with a turnover cover. Sky reversed it. IYO then avoided Pop Rocks normally. She avoided it a second time by flipping over with a handstand, kind of similar to the way that she countered Rose Plant from Bayley at WrestleMania. Sky immediately caught Perez, adding over the moonsault for the 1-2-3. This could have been a main roster main event. Easily. Put this in any arena. Fans would have gone wild for it. All four of them were fantastic. The right winner and loser, just because Roxy's been taking so many L's of late, so you don't need her to win. You don't need to pin Julia for any reason, so it just made sense. The second Pop Rocks counter by IYO was ridiculous. A very casual A-level match, 4.25 stars. Crazy stuff from all of them. I'm quite confident in saying this coming out of the match. IYO is not just the best women's wrestler in WWE. She might be the best wrestler in WWE coming out of WrestleMania. This is not a surprise to anyone who knows her ceiling, obviously. But she's finally getting an opportunity to show her full range of skills. And she's sparkling every single time she's out there. WrestleMania, the last 2 weeks on Raw, now NXT. I know John Cena and Seth Rollins, they have their big angles going right now. They're getting massive pops. And LA Knight and Jacob Fatu and all these guys are over. I get it. But I legitimately think IYO has the greatest momentum in the company right now. It's no wonder they're having her show up on NXT and do all this stuff. And I'm extremely curious to see how far this goes and where it actually ends. And whether that's Becky Lynch potentially, whether that's Rhea Ripley like we probably expect at this juncture, we'll certainly find out in the future. Stephanie Vaquer backstage told Ava that she's ready to defend her championship. Ava said her next challenger should be Julia or Jordynne, just given everything that's happened recently. She cut off Vaquer from accepting both as challengers, and she announced the number one contendership for next week. I actually thought it was funny that she cut her off because what Stephanie has done the last, month, 2 months, is when there's a challenger, she's like, yeah, I'll just fight everyone. That's fine. Now, it probably should be Grace, given we've seen plenty of Julia with Stephanie, and they really should not be rematching at Battleground of all shows. The problem with Jordynne is that of the two, she hardly has any storyline or character in NXT so far. She's just been used as the other woman to this point. Maybe making this title match could be a step in that direction to help her. My presumption is Grace wins this and Julia gets called up, just given we've seen her with Perez on Raw so much. But the other way to do it is to do Vaquer and Julia as a blow-off. Vaquer wins again, Julia gets called up, and they don't rematch until Stephanie debuts on Raw or SmackDown eventually. Maybe Rhea Ripley is involved here. I could see that happening given that's part of the Raw storyline, but we will see what happens Monday night, and we'll have a better idea then what's going to happen, of course, on Tuesday and then at Battleground. A North American Championship, Ricky Saints defended against Lexis King. Saints countered Coronation into a tornado DDT, hit Rochambeau to retain the title. Basic match that didn't accomplish anything for either of them. At least it was the merciful conclusion of that dreadful 3-segment stretch from last week. Saints badly needs a new finisher. Neither the Spear nor Rochambeau are it. It makes zero impact. Kings never should have had this title match. We talked about that last week. I'm just glad it's dead and buried. Let's move on with both of them into something that's actually interesting. Tatum Paxley and Gigi Dolan were depressed backstage that they lost 2 tag team title matches in a week. Ashanti the Adonis came in calling them losers, to which Carbon Petrovic took offense. Then he informed her that she got her a match and she wasn't even ready for it. So we had Sol Ruka against Petrovic, non-title. Ruka handed Zarya her title before the match, and Zarya stared at it longingly. Sol won a short match with Soul Snatcher, and I'm now of the belief that Ruka needs a secondary finisher for a couple different reasons. First, Soul Snatcher is far too spectacular to be seen on a weekly basis. Second, she should not need that to beat someone like Carmen, who has accomplished zero in NXT so far. Maybe the cartwheel tightrope DDT can be her other finisher, maybe a submission move, maybe something with a little bit of power to it. There has to be another option for Soul. She cannot use the Soul Snatcher every single week. Carmen turned on Ashanti after the bell with a huge kick to the head, so finally that's over. I hate to say it. I cannot imagine Adonis remaining with WWE much longer unless he goes down to Evolve or something like that. I like what he's actually been doing on NXT, but it just seems to be going absolutely nowhere. Kalani Jordan later shaded Ruka backstage for not defending the title in each of her matches. Sol was ready to accept the challenge. Zarya stopped her cold and stood in front of Ruka, saying Jordan has to go through her first. We know she's eyeing the title, Zarya, so it seems like the jealousy is still being pushed down or held down in her gut for now. I hate the idea of Lani beating Zarya, but I'm sure it's going to happen in some way. Maybe Sol tries to help, accidentally cost her partner, and we get her, title match for Lani. But Lani should not be anywhere near the North American Championship. Give her another storyline to sink her teeth into. I like what she was doing with Jada Parker. I know you can't continue that forever. Do something else with a different superstar. It's very simple. Tony D'Angelo hit the ring saying he never expected Stax would do this to him because he's always given him the benefit of the doubt and he's always had his back in the neighborhood. And by the way, vice versa. Tony D explained that Stax was too impulsive, which is why he needed to be the one to make big decisions. D'Angelo promised Stax would pay for stabbing him in the back. Suddenly, a bunch of guys in black t-shirts walked out as Stax appeared on the Titantron while standing on a bridge, claiming Tony D was getting soft and he's no longer capable of leading the family. The guys who had Tony's back, they didn't budge. The other ones that came out when Stax appeared on the big screen, they attacked, and D'Angelo made quick work of them. This was actually one of the best D'Angelo family talking and acting segments we've gotten, probably in the entirety of the faction. Both guys did well in their respective parts. They built anticipation for an eventual match, one that probably should have a stipulation, if we're being honest. What I would have done to make this better would be remove all of the extras from around the ring. They added absolutely nothing. The segment was strong enough to hang on the drama and their promos without any limited action or anything else. It was more than enough. D'Angelo and Stax on the mic, one on a bridge for some reason, and of course the other in the middle of the ring. Metaphor backstage welcomed Noam Dar back to NXT, but when he called for a reunion, Lash Legend sat him down saying Oro Mensah needed to be his own main man on Evolve. Jakara Jackson must break out on her own and Lash needs to take care of herself. They agreed to always have each other's backs before ultimately splitting up. This was actually a really sweet and sentimental segment, just given they all worked so well together. It seemed to be a random faction at first, Metaphor, but it completely worked way, way beyond expectation. Now, it obviously makes sense to split Metaphor given the girls have kind of moved past the guys in their progression toward the main roster. I know Lash is stronger than Jakara, but it's an absolute shocker that they're splitting up when WWE badly needs legitimate women's tag teams and they work extremely well together. The options I can see are Legend getting a singles push in NXT or getting called up to the main roster and maybe being a heavy for Naomi. That with Naomi would actually be pretty awesome if they did that. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what sense it makes to split them. So fingers crossed if she's getting called up, it's with Naomi going up against Jade. That's how you integrate Bianca into that feud back when, her hand heals eventually. But man, I don't feel good about Jakara being on her own because she's not strong enough to last individually. She needs to be part of a team. And that team with Lash worked. And this goes back to something I've said many, many times. First of all, with Metaphor, they could all do their own thing and stay together and just have that relationship to each other. Keep calling a Metaphor, say Lash is part of Metaphor, and just, even if it's cross brands, like, it would work. So that was frustrating. But again, when you talk about women and women's tag teams on the main roster, I've said this many times. There's no reason not to pair up women, have them make a tag team with a name, in this case, Metagirls, but have one of them be a star single or have both of them wrestle single. Maybe one's a star like Lash and the other one is more of a jobber, does work and takes falls in singles matches that to enhance other talent. That's okay, right? You just need them to be somewhat legitimate as a team for them to actually work. And then when they're in a team setting, they can win or lose depending who you want to get the fall, Lash or Jakara. I don't understand still why WWE struggles with this concept. The women's tag team division, it's better than it has been in a little bit, but there's still a finite number of teams and only so many that you actually believe are contenders. The Caseys are on and off TV. You have no belief in them doing anything. The Damage Control girls, other than IYO, aren't on TV, even though they're apparently healthy. Liv and Raquel obviously are a great team, and they're the actual champions. And that's pretty much it. You put Natalya and Maxine Dupree together. Briefly, they had one match. And, now we haven't seen them on TV since. It's only been a couple of weeks, but nevertheless. So it's just, and also Pure Fusion. Like, they exist in an ether somewhere. They're on TV only when totally required. Otherwise, you don't see them. That's despite Zoe Stark, being great in ring, lacking charisma. Shayna Baszler maybe not being what everyone expected at this juncture in her career. So I don't know. It seemed like a great opportunity to bring up these girls together. The fact that they're not doing that is frustrating, but we'll see what the booking is for both of them individually and whether Lash winds up on the main roster or she's still in NXT. But again, I'm going to say it like a fourth time. I really like the idea of Lash being a heavy for Naomi. In fact, I don't see why Lash and Jakara couldn't both back up Naomi and just create a little group. Like, proceed with caution. That's the name of the group. Like, why not do that? I don't know. NQCC commiserated backstage with Tavian Heights telling Miles Bourne that Charlie Dempsey was angry he teamed up with Javon Evans last week. Bourne stood up for himself and them, but Heights kept worrying about what Dempsey would say. I'm not sure I understand the reason for potentially splitting this group unless Dempsey and Heights are going to make a true tag team run, or maybe this is just a get in line situation, but it was some of the most personality that Miles has been allowed to show yet. And that was hugely positive for his development because to this point, it's all been like jokes about him being deaf that he's been in on the entire time, obviously. And you got to have more personality than that. We have to have a reason to actually root for you other than the fact that you're deaf. And he's given us that by his in-ring performance. Now we need it from a character, and it seems like they're going in that direction. So that's hugely positive. Chase U was back in session with Andre Chase, now sporting some kind of ugly mullet. Kale Dixon and Uriah Connors came in late to class, so a student tried to call them out. Chase cursed out the nerd. Expected a little bit more just given how long we've been waiting, but the dynamic of Dixon and Connors being like the cool kids in the school, it's quite different from what Chase U was previously. So that's a start. I'm actually kind of interested in the direction here. Sean Spears taught a lesson from the Culling's recent failures, saying they cannot define them as a group. He said Izzy Dame needs to rip the spotlight from a loaded women's division onto herself, while the guys need to become more cohesive as a team in order to level up and beat Hank and Tank. What was funny about this segment, it had nothing to do with the cult meeting, which nothing they said was really notable. But the shit was sponsored by Progressive. So like the meeting starts and you're like, oh, okay, it's the Calling. And then a big white logo pops up on the bottom of the screen and you're like, why would Progressive, and I know they don't necessarily get to choose exact segments maybe that they sponsor, but why would an insurance company sponsor a cult meeting, right? They just wouldn't do it. I just found it hysterical live watching it, and I couldn't get my mind off of it. This was a crazy night on NXT, all things considered. Two factions straight broke up, a relationship ended, tension was teased in two other factions, and another relationship, plus a faction came back together without much to it. That said, I wasn't a huge fan of the episode outside of the main event. It feels like NXT is still trying to get its bearings again after the MSG Theater show and the Stand and Deliver show, basically shoving all of its big matches into a really short window. Most notable area in which NXT can improve right now is the men's mid-card. Ricky Saints needs to be booked a lot better, and he's got to be put in a lot more interesting feuds as champion. Plus, there needs to be movement around him, developing future contenders, getting more mid-card men on the screen. I know it's crazy to say because, like, how many years when we've talked about WWE have we said the women need to be featured more, tag teams need to be featured more? NXT does that. It's actually the men where it's a struggle right now, especially in the mid-card. And they got to step that up because it just feels like the show, I don't want to say it's missing its soul because that's certainly not the case, but it feels like a chunk of what always made NXT so intriguing is missing, and it is certainly not missing from the women's division. So that wraps up NXT. As I mentioned, let's talk WWE Evolve. We're going to do this fastest 5-minute style, and I actually think we're going to go shorter than that, but let's go ahead and start the clock right now. Episode 5, Zeta Steele flashed in a Brindley Reese win. Brindley is getting better. She just doesn't really stand out that much. Swipe Right helped Zeta leave the ring, which I thought might develop into something. Luca Crucifino said he's on Evolve to push the influence of D'Angelo family. So much for that. Keanu Carter straight up beasted him in a match. That dude is impressive as hell, but he's still way raw. Harlem Lewis beat Joe Coffey, which I get some of the young guys need to go over. It feels like they never, ever lose in Evolve, and that's just probably not right. Wendy Chu beat Kylie Ray with Dirt Nap in the main event. Really nice match, enjoying the story between them. Probably the best of the first 5 episodes by a decent margin. Episode 6, Riley Osborne wore an awful cutout tights. He beat Javier Bernal with Starstream, basically a shooting star press. Bernal appeared to give up the big body Javi gimmick after the match. There's a pretty wild 8-man involving the usual parties. Swipe Right again shined, as did Cappuccino Jones. Danny Palmer totally ate shit on a frog splash, flat on her stomach like a swan dive, and Callie Armstrong ran through her with a shoulder tackle in the main event. Callie is an incredible talent. She's super unique. I understand the Bianca Belair comparisons. She doesn't really stand up to her apples to apples, though, other than having a big build and athleticism. She is much more of a power wrestler. She's actually closer to a more athletic Jade Cargill, is what I would say. She's different, though, and that's her gimmick, too, that she's built different. Episode 7, Trill London had his best showing yet, hitting a flip-over dropkick using the top rope. I've never seen that move before. Harlem Lewis won the match anyway with a jackhammer. Gallus finally got a win on Evolve, but Jones was protected in the finish. Jordan Osiris actually did a really sick, draping cannonball where he caught himself on the ropes. Oro Mensah beat Bernal, and I could see him possibly getting pushed as the first Evolve champion. It'll probably be one of the other young guys, though. The 4-way women's main event, it was one of the best Evolve matches to date and the best during this 5-show binge that I did. Callie again beasted in the finish. It would be an utter shock if she is not the first women's Evolve champion. 3.75 stars B+ just for that match. Episode 8, Swipe Right, Zeta, and 2 others formed a faction called the Vanity Project. I'm pretty sure that this dude, Brad Baylor, his balls still need to drop because his voice is crazy high-pitched. Sean Legacy showed out in a fun opening match. Kylie was still going after Wendy. They're going to rematch. Zara Zucker impressed massively in a singles match. I think her name is Zara Zacker, actually. I apologize. I really like her moveset and athleticism. Carly Bright beat the referee Jessica Carr, who's wrestling under a mask and going by Calyx on Evolve. But Calyx is actually the real name of Sol Ruca. So piece that together. Timothy Thatcher returned to Evolve and put on a nice main event with Bryce Donovan before taking the L. All in all, another quality show, not the best of the 5 I binged. And finally, episode 9, Tyreek Igwe and Tyson DuPont had their first Evolve match. They're either called T&T or TNT now. It was really tough to tell from commentary. They looked good. Wendy beat Kylie for the second time with Dirt Nap. She drew a frown on her face after the bell. This involves a teddy bear that belonged to Kylie's son. That got destroyed. It's corny, but it's simultaneously working. Carver and Lewis beat Swipe Right in the main event while basically competing against one another throughout. Just typical single stars kind of beating a top tag team type of situation. The work was strong from all 4 guys. They really just threw these guys around, though. Carver and Lewis did. Just beat the ever-loving shit out of them. And it does seem there's a major announcement for next week, so it does seem like they're probably going to announce Evolve title tournaments. That's just a guess. All in all, this remains a show you do not need to watch. WWE LFG on A&E, like I said, it is more entertaining, apples to apples. But if you want something to throw on in the background while you clean the house or cook dinner or give your dog a bath or whatever errands you're doing or activities you're doing in the house, it's probably better than constant repeats of diners, drive-ins, and dives on Food Network or something like that. That's where I would put this right now. Perhaps once they get the Evolve title situated and they do all that, maybe it'll be a little bit better. So that wraps up NXT and Evolve, but we have AEW coming up in a moment. Before we get to that, allow the Silver King to remind you that here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast,
it's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. But seriously, for old and new Spotify listeners, if you have not rated us 5 stars, please make sure you do that. Our rating there is immensely important. It is where we are getting our most new listenership. And if you happen to be a new Spotify listener, make sure you hit that subscribe button right here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. All right, let's go ahead and move to AEW. This week, 5 of 12 matches were storyline relevant, 42%. Obviously, nowhere near where it needs to be. Even if I flipped one that was kind of borderline, it's at 50%, 6 of 12. And it's just ridiculous when all you're being asked to do is book 4 hours of weekly television. I know AEW per hour has more matches than WWE and has more wrestling time. That's cool. But if the matches don't actually matter, then I don't give a shit that they're actually happening. Collision for me remains a complete waste of time. Dynamite was a notable step up from last week. Still not on par with those banger after banger episodes that we had been getting. And that's okay because look, those shows were a really tough bar to reach, and this one was still super fun. So let's go ahead and break down everything that happened across Dynamite and Collision. We're going to do it by topic, of course, not by show. On Collision, Swerve Strickland beat Blake Christian in 4 minutes. The Young Bucks interrupted Swerve from cutting a pre-match promo, saying they moved his match up in the show. That was supposed to put him at a disadvantage, given he was wearing a t-shirt and leather pants. Lee Johnson failed on a post-match attack. The Bucks hit EVP trigger. Kenny Omega prevented further damage with a save. This was how AEW opened its Playoff Palooza episode. I just thought it was a massive, massive mistake. The idea when you have an episode backed up against the NBA playoffs, your biggest possible lead-in is to capture and retain audience. A Bucks promo and Swerve beating a flavor of the month jobber, it's not going to capture and retain audience. This should have been a huge, chaotic, Dynamite level angle, or at least an insane match of some kind. Omega and Swerve, they fist bumped after. A match was announced that didn't involve Strickland for some reason on Dynamite. And again, I just felt like this is not how you capitalize on a great opportunity, capturing NBA playoff viewers to keep watching wrestling. On Dynamite, the Elite and Ricochet won what was billed as an all-star 8-man tag team match over Omega, Kevin Knight, Speedball Mike Bailey, and Mark Briscoe. This went 26 minutes to open the show, and frankly, it was a mix of great wrestling and absurd indie shit. It seems like Knight and Bailey might become a tag team. If not, they are still working a bunch together. There was a straight ridiculous spot where all 8 guys did consecutive elbow drops, one after another, into the center of the ring, half of them with nobody even there to potentially hit. Tony Schiavone said, "God, I love this." I am sure you do, Tone. I'm sure you do. I don't. Then Bailey and Briscoe both did crane kicks. There was also a heavily choreographed spot of 4 suplexes followed by 4 slingshot topes. There was an Omega stare down with Kazuchika Okada. The heels then did a 4-way spike pile driver senton fall, so all 4 faces got hurt at once. That was a great spot. It was a false finish. Knight dropkicked Ricochet in an electric chair while he was already ringside. Briscoe lost after eating Rainmaker. And look, that fall could have happened 5 minutes earlier. Ultimately, the right side won. It helped the heels more than it would have this random babyface team. Party matches can be fun. That's what the style was. But it went twice as long as necessary. I don't have this love affair with PWG like some others do. So to me, it was taking 25% of your biggest show and saying, hey, we're having fun. You know? Furthermore, this match did show me that Knight is way more wet behind the ears. I guess that would be wetter. He's way wetter behind the ears than I initially thought. I'm sure this will wind up being heavily graded by others. I was at 3.5 stars and a B. Fun and fine. Also forgettable the moment it was over. On Collision, Samoa Joe in a Hawaiian shirt cut a promo on Jon Moxley, basically saying he's coming for the AEW title, will not be pushed aside, and there's nothing Death Riders can do about it. On Dynamite, the Ops beat 3 jobbers in a 3-minute non-title match. Still no hook, by the way. Death Riders attacked after the bell. Joe again got Mox in the Coquina clutch, but he had to release it, trying but failing to save Katsuyori Shibata from getting put into an upturned chair with Claudio Castagnoli's neutralizer. Joe cut a promo calling Mox a bitch and a coward for running away, challenging him to put the title match in 2 weeks inside a steel cage. It was all fine. There is no expectation that Joe wins this title, so the stipulation creates an opportunity for shenanigans to allow a Mox retention. Also creates an opportunity for him to blade into a Crimson Mask. A steel cage match is inherently more interesting than a regular bout between them. Joe, he is so authentic on the mic. He just levels up stuff by speaking to it. That's it. That's all he has to do. Having the ops win the trios titles, yet fight jobbers while the leader is focused on the main title, that's super silly. Credit to AEW for waiting about an hour before confirming the stipulation, as opposed to doing it immediately after the challenge like they have done for most of the last 5 years. They finally got that right. Hopefully, it will continue like that in the future. On Dynamite, Hangman Page fought Kyle Fletcher in the Owens semifinal. There was a good dual promo segment on Collision with both guys acquitting themselves quite well. Pretty basic topic-wise, though. Don Callis cut a promo on Dynamite, putting over the top members of his family before the match. Hangman took a nasty apron brainbuster deep into the match. He quickly came back with a moonsault off the barricade, catching Fletcher for a tombstone on the floor. Page added 2 dead eyes in the ring and on the apron before hitting his moonsault ringside. Fletcher shoved the referee to distract from a low blow counter to a buckshot lariat for a false finish. Hangman knocked Fletcher off the ropes, hit a buckshot lariat from the turnbuckles, and then he added a second traditional one to get the win. I freaking loved the finish to this match. So inventive of Page to do the buckshot that way, and taking 2 finishers like that completely protected Fletcher, which was necessary. This was the best AEW match of the week by a mile, and it was kind of in line, maybe slightly above the women's tag on NXT. It's an A match. Whether you're at 4.25 or 4.5, I don't even know where I am. I'm probably at 4.35 or 4.4, something like that. It was great and borderline for me. Hangman and Ospreay in the finals of the Owen with the winner going up against a heel Mox, presumably. It makes all the sense in the world. You really could go either way and do no wrong. I'm sure we'll get a greater indication on who to lean toward in a prediction over the next few weeks. It was hardly a surprise Page won this semifinal for a few reasons. Obviously, because he and Ospreay is more compelling of a match at this juncture. Also because Dynamite was in Virginia, his home state. And Ospreay Fletcher at this point, they really should not rematch until there's a title on the line. And really, it's 6 months or a year or something further down the line. They just had that banger steel cage match. I will say, aesthetically, I hate Hangman's short hair. The dude looks like he's rocking a perm. You got to fix that up, buddy. On Dynamite, Hurt Syndicate backstage beat up 5 guys for chanting "We hurt people" at them. They were positively supporting them, and they still beat them up. Seemed a little reactionary and unnecessary. MVP and Shelton Benjamin put the press on Bobby Lashley to reconsider MJF because they trust MVP. MJF is funny, and he can benefit them. MVP said they can always hurt him if he screws them over. I maintain that it has not been articulated how exactly MJF can help guys who are already champions get whatever matches they want made and have not stated any goal otherwise. They haven't said they want more money. They haven't said they want other titles. What are they not getting that MVP believes MJF can help them with? So this segment happened 15 minutes into hour 2 with MJF putting over Shelton and MVP before getting confrontational with Lashley, who again gave him a thumbs down. Lashley milked the decision quite well. At this moment, I was like, are they really just going to vote weekly until the end of time? You know? MJF told Lashley he's sick of his shit. He asked what he really wants, suggesting Rogaine and calling him a big, bald son of a bitch. Lashley grabbed him by the face and neck, dragged him into the corner, and he reminded, "We hurt people," and basically said that's the way to impress me. MJF cowered, saying Bobby made his point, and they all just kind of left. It just petered out from there, kind of like an SNL skit. It's like they didn't have any closer, really. Here's the thing about this storyline. MJF in kayfabe is a really smart guy. He takes advantage of opportunities and people and always gets what he wants. From the beginning, MVP told him that he needs to prove his value to the group, which is called Hurt Syndicate, which has a catchphrase, "We hurt people." Now, I didn't mind this segment as constructed. It was still the best thing on AEW television this week outside of the Hangman and Fletcher match. But it would have hit a lot harder and have been a lot more intriguing as a viewer if MJF had come to this realization on his own. Again, because he's smart and this had been laid out since the beginning. Whether that was still him getting backed up into a corner, Bobby, I get it. I know what I need to do, and not speaking it, or them not getting physical and a light going off in MJF's head, perhaps as the others were walking back down the ramp and he's depressed in the ring. To me, that's the difference between doing a storyline and excelling in storytelling. Lashley, MJF, and MVP are all way more capable of nuance than a lot of other people in this company. I know some out there are calling this amazing and great. To me, it's quite good. Because unlike most stuff on AEW TV, it's created intrigue. It has solid pacing, but that does not mean it's perfect or cannot be done better. Now, there's two ways this can go, because I think we can all acknowledge that MJF in Hurt Syndicate, even if it was to happen, it would be short-lived. One is for MJF to perhaps hurt Hangman, whom he's still been feuding with on and off, and it would make sense as a person to hurt. The other is for MJF to take exception to Lashley laying hands on him, recruit FTR, hurt some other people, make it seem as if he's ready to join them, and then create a new pinnacle with FTR and they just take out Hurt Syndicate and you go in that direction. Both ways could work. I'm actually more intrigued by the pinnacle idea, kind of recruiting FTR, getting them all back together. Now you have a storyline that you can run between both of them. Hangman, even if he doesn't, let's say he doesn't beat Ospreay, Hangman can kind of link up with Hurt Syndicate. It's a pretty big trio going against MJF and FTR. They can wrestle singles. They can wrestle tag team. They could go after the trios titles. Lots of things that you could do. But we, of course, will see what happens with the storyline. I just feel like they hit us over the head a little bit too much with the, oh, you need to now go out and hurt people, when MJF, again, should just come to that realization himself because he's a really smart guy. And honestly, he should have realized it weeks ago at this point. The other thing is, MJF speaks time and again about being bullied growing up and, how all these people he hates because of the way he's been treated. Hurt Syndicate is not treating him well. He may respect MVP, and Shelton may be coming around because he's funny, but Lashley's treating him like shit. I'm just kind of, remembering this at the end here. That's another reason he should probably never join them and just attack them, go full heel, and have Hurt Syndicate go full face. Mercedes Moné and Jamie Hayter did a back and forth promo on Collision that was pretty solid. Didn't do the bullshit where they answer each other's insults, and that was appreciated by me. Moné then got interviewed on Dynamite saying she respects the Hearts, but winning the tournament is not about them. It's increasing her legacy. She said Hayter reminded her of when she was younger, but called her style Scooby-Doo, saying a champion can't look like a cartoon. And you know what, Mercedes?
Thank you.
Good call there. Jamie has looked ridiculous since she returned, whether that's her style or not. Solid stuff from Mercedes here. Just not that much to discuss, given it's all ahead of a tournament semifinal match that's going to be happening, I think, Saturday. On Collision, Toni Storm beat Queen Aminata in a nice eliminator match that ended with Storm 0. Aminata has something. She's just not all the way there yet. Probably like 2 years away, I would say. A reminder that Storm beat Aminata just a couple weeks ago, so this was entirely unnecessary, especially since it wasn't built as a rematch or anything like that. On Dynamite, Storm beat Mayu Yamashita in another really nice eliminator match that ended with Storm 0. There was an introductory video package about Yamashita that was appreciated by yours truly, but it was blatant that they rushed through it as quick as they possibly could, basically to satiate critics rather than actually give fans a reason to care about her or the match. This was better bell to bell than the Aminata match. It included a violent hip attack by Toni. Almost called her Tori for some reason. Mercedes walked out and literally said, "I'm coming for your title." And then Jamie briefly attacked her, looking more like Scooby-Doo than ever before. If that's not purposeful, then it was just an insane coincidence. On Collision, FTR beat Paragon in 21 minutes. This was like a classic NXT black and gold style match. FTR had their same gear, now in all black. Cash Wheeler broke a grapevine knee bar on Dax Harwood with a splash. Tony Schiavone acknowledged 5 fans chanting "Fight Forever" before a spike pile driver ended it. The finish was disappointing just given the quality of the match otherwise. It was easily the best bout on Saturday, though. 3.75 stars B+. FTR hit Shatter Machine on Roderick Strong after the bell as Stokely Hathaway held Adam Cole's leg down. Daniel Garcia saved with a crowbar. So Paragon, a group, needed to be saved from a tag team and a manager. Garcia called them pieces of trash and promised to get revenge on them week after week. The way I would book this is simple. You put Garcia with Cole in a tag team match next week against FTR. You have Garcia turn heel and join FTR. He badly needs the character refresh. That would also put them 3-on-3, generate some buzz in the youngster, and maybe he even takes the title back from Cole with FTR's help. We'll see if they do that. And you're saying Silver King, I thought you just said you wanted MJF with FTR. I do. Put them all together. That's the faction. That's the new pinnacle. MJF, Garcia, and FTR. MJF and Garcia, it's as simple as Garcia realizes MJF was right all along. I mean, I know he bloodied him and did all that shit, but you got to give this kid something. And right now, Babyface, who doesn't even dance anymore to his bad music, it just doesn't work. On Collision, the crew beat Top Flight in a tornado tag team match. The heels dumped plastic Mardi Gras beads out of a bag, which was silly, but it was kind of fine for New Orleans. Darius Martin got shoved into Layla Gray on the apron. The heels hit a basement springboard cutter, neckbreaker, frog splash, and springboard 450. Dante was out of action ridiculously long for the finish. He popped up way too early beyond the apron, showing he basically could have broken the fall. This fell so far below expectations, just given the athleticism of all four guys and the tornado stipulation. I thought this was going to be a total banger. And instead, it was kind of plodding in parts. Super disappointing. On Collision, the ROH title was on the line. Bandito beat Dralistico to retain in a first-time ever matchup. Bandito did get some chance and hit the 21-plex to retain the title. If you're going to put the ROH title on AEW TV, it should be with a deep storyline that makes us give a shit about the match. Bandito and Chris Jericho. I mean, it wasn't the best storyline, but it was a storyline. This did not accomplish that. On Collision, Jeff Jarrett's entire crew is back on TV for some reason. Jay Lethal made a case of Sanjay Dutt not being there, but he walked in immediately. Lethal tore him down as the reason for them being sidelined. It seemed like Lethal is maybe taking over. Who is this for exactly? Not me. On Dynamite, Christian Cage interrupted a Nick Wayne interview about going over to Japan. Lethal stepped in saying Wayne still has a lot to prove against the longest reigning ROH TV champion in the title's history. Nick tried to talk his way out of it. Christian accepted the match for him, saying that's what it takes to be champion. And you know what? He's right. Wayne should not be turning down a challenge at age 20. So later on Dynamite, the ROH TV title was on the line. Wayne retained over Lethal. Wayne raked the eyes, pushed Lethal into the middle turnbuckle, and won with a between-the-legs fisherman's buster. I believe Lethal legitimately hurt his eardrum with a kick to the side of the head, but he could have just been selling. Christian led some applause for Nick after the bell, and Kip Sabian again did and said nothing the entire show. On Collision, Hologram beat Max Caster in a 2-minute open challenge. On Collision, Roosh beat AR Fox in 3 minutes. AEW, they need to decide whether Fox is a legitimate opponent or enhancement talent, because it's maddening right now. This dude should not be going 8 minutes with Ospreay and 11 minutes with Ricochet and then 3 minutes with Roosh. It's dumb. It's inconsistent booking as per usual. On Collision, Anna Jay beat a jobber in 55 seconds. Penelope Ford confronted afterward. She beat her down. Megan Bayne took like 90 minutes getting to the ring for face descent. It's positive that Bayne is getting a real opponent after a completely wasted month. There's still nothing on the relationship between her and Ford, nor any reason as to why Jay was chosen as an attack situation here. I really just believe if they took the last month and they built up the relationship of Ford and Bayne, it would have been so much more successful than having Megan come out there and squash a couple jobbers. It just was ridiculous. On Collision, Brian Keith backstage told Big Bill they can stop disappointing Chris Jericho by stacking wins and cracking skulls. Bill wasn't concerned about Jericho, but he was into the rest of the idea, which is understandable given it was his idea last week. Bill said they could but don't want to fight any jobbers. Instead, they want to fight Gates of Agony, given they just challenged for the tag team titles. Okay, that's something. And on Collision, Roppongi Vice was backstage with Trent Beretta, angry about still being called underrated in 2025. Trent, I hate to break it to you, dog. No one's calling you anything in 2025, let alone underrated. Rocky Romero was pissed about not being put on the conglomeration t-shirt, saying that was disrespectful. So he turned heel against all his friends because he wasn't on a t-shirt? Really? Then they attacked the Outrunners. There wasn't anything wrong with this other than the concept of thinking anyone gives a shit about Roppongi Vice in 2025. It's kind of ridiculous at the base level, and having them operate on their own here and not be with the Callis family, which had their own segment, are they part of that or are they not? Why aren't they talking about joining the Callis family? It just really didn't fit together for me. So, again, these last 5 segments or 6 segments I talked about, they're all Collision. And they're just throwaway bullshit that just shouldn't be on television. Either use the 4 hours that you have or cut down your TV time. It's one of the two. They're getting paid, so they're not going to do the latter, which means stick to the former. Use your TV time better. So that wraps up AEW this week. And right before we get out, we haven't talked ratings in a long-ass time, and we're really not going to go deep on this conversation. But I figured since we skipped them the entire month of April, let's go ahead and look at how NXT and Dynamite are doing from a ratings perspective. So for NXT, their viewership numbers over the last 5 weeks have gone like this: 650,000, 683,000, 663,000, 686,000 against the NBA playoffs. And then this week, 674,000 against the NBA playoffs. And their demos have been 0.15, 0.17, 0.14, 0.17, 0.15. So just consistency across the board. And I actually believe they have something to kind of tip their cap to, their success, over the last 2 weeks, going 686 and 674 against major NBA playoff games. That is impressive to retain your rating and in some ways improve your rating from April 1st, which was the lowest of the 5 that I just mentioned, despite going against much heavier competition than usual. So kudos to NXT for that. The AEW Dynamite rating for this week is not out as we tape the show, so we'll just quickly go over the last 4. Starting April 2nd and every Wednesday, of course, 594,000, 659,000, 624,000, and then 521,000 last week against the NBA playoffs, obviously. The demos, 0.16, 0.17, 0.17, 0.14. So not a surprise necessarily that AEW went down more against the NBA playoffs than NXT did, but I mean, that's a significant drop, 100,000 viewers just in 1 week because of competition when NXT did not go down anywhere near the same amount. I don't think that's indicative of anything necessarily, but it's kind of notable to me that they suffered that kind of dip in 1 week. Obviously, we don't have this week's ratings. Perhaps they got it all back and there's nothing to be concerned about whatsoever. And I just want to say one more thing before we get out about all this ratings. There's talk about more people are watching Dynamite on Max. Yeah, there could be a significant percentage maybe, watching on Max. No one ever talks about the fact that people don't just have broadcast cable in their homes, all these cord cutters, and there are no ratings for NXT coming out of the CW app, which is where a lot of people actually watch NXT because, again, they just don't have a system that allows them to have the CW, whether that's YouTube TV or Fubo or whatever the case might be. Some people have nothing, and their only way to watch NXT is on the CW app, and that is not counted in their total as well. So if you're going to mention one, you got to mention the other. It's a little bit different. Max, obviously a lot better and bigger reach than the CW app, but for a show that it may not be available to a group of people, that is absolutely worth noting. So look, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. A ton, of course, that we covered across NXT, AEW, briefly Evolve, some TNA and Stardom mixed in there as well. And we certainly will have a loaded WWE episode coming up for you on Tuesday because guess what? Somehow it's going to be your WWE Backlash Ultimate Preview. I have no idea how it's already here, but that is WWE scheduling for you in 2025. So come back Tuesday for the WWE show, and then same bat time, same bat channel on Thursday. We'll be talking NXT and AEW. On the way out, quickly, remember that here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast,
it's all about Defy.
Please leave those 5-star reviews for us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you leave a written review on Apple, we'll read it right here on the show. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky. And lastly, remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
Hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major TV show, exclusive news analysis posts every week. Please support us financially. buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. See you on Tuesday. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.